You reach for something sweet without really deciding to. A small automatic craving that shows up after a meal, during a stressful afternoon, late at night for no clear reason at all. A pull towards sugar so familiar you barely register it as a choice anymore. That craving feels like a modern weakness, something you should probably be able to talk yourself out of if you just had a little more discipline. It is not modern, and it is not weakness. It is one of the oldest, most reliable signals your body has ever produced. Human beings are born already wired to want sweetness. Researcher Julie Mennella of the Monell Chemical Senses Center has spent years studying taste preferences in infants, including newborns only hours old who have never eaten a single solid food in their lives. Manella's research found that infants reliably show a preference for sweet tastes almost immediately, responding with visibly more relaxed, contented expressions to sweet liquids compared to plain or bitter ones, well before any learning or exposure could explain the reaction. In some of her studies, even premature infants born weeks early showed the same calming response to a small amount of sweetness, suggesting the wiring for this preference is present before birth itself finishes its final stages. This was not a preference babies picked up from watching adults or from advertising. It showed up before any of that was possible, suggesting the craving for sweetness is built into human biology from the very beginning, not layered on top of it later by culture. That wiring did not appear randomly. It appears to be the product of a very specific evolutionary pressure, one connected directly to how your ancestors found food in the first place. Biological anthropologist Nathaniel Dominy of Dartmouth College has studied the evolution of primate color vision, specifically the trichromatic vision that allows humans and some other primates to distinguish red and orange tones from green far more easily than most mammals can. Dominy's research connected this specific visual ability to the challenge of spotting ripe, sugar-rich fruit hidden among green leaves in a forest canopy. A ripe fruit is, chemically speaking, a concentrated sugar reward, and an ancestor who could visually pick out that reddish or orange fruit against a wall of green foliage from a distance had a real advantage over one who could not, saving critical time and energy compared to a competitor who had to approach every piece of fruit just to check whether it was ready. The craving for sweetness and the visual system, built partly to help you find it, appear to have evolved together, two halves of the same survival strategy. For nearly all of that evolutionary history, satisfying that craving required real effort, and the supply was never guaranteed. Wild fruit ripened only during specific windows of the year. It rotted quickly once picked. It had to be found often high in a tree or scattered across a wide territory and competed for with birds, insects, and other animals with the exact same craving. Sweetness was never something you could simply reach for. It was a reward you had to work to earn, and even then, only during certain seasons. That changed dramatically once humans began deliberately cultivating a plant capable of storing enormous amounts of sugar in a form that did not spoil the moment it was picked. Geneticist Ming of the University of Illinois led research sequencing the sugarcane genome, tracing the plant's domestication back to the island of New Guinea roughly 8,000 years ago. Wild sugarcane in that region contained modest amounts of sugar concentrated in its stalks, but early cultivators appear to have selectively grown and replanted the sweetest, thickest canes generation after generation, gradually breeding a plant that could store far more sugar than its wild ancestor ever had. Ming's genetic analysis traced this selective process across thousands of years, identifying the specific genetic changes that separated modern cultivated sugarcane from its far less sweet wild relatives still growing in the same region today. For the first time, sweetness could be grown on purpose, harvested in bulk, and kept on hand rather than hunted down fruit by fruit through a forest canopy. Picture what that shift actually meant on the ground. A wild ancestor spending hours scanning a green canopy for a single distinctive reddish fruit, climbing to reach it, competing with birds for the privilege, then eating it immediately before it spoiled. Compare that to an early cultivator in New Guinea, walking out to a planted stand of cane, cutting a thick stalk, and chewing directly on concentrated sugar that had been waiting there the entire time, requiring no search, no climb, no competition with anything faster or higher up in the canopy. The same craving that once demanded hours of effort and patient seasonal timing had, for the first time in the entire history of the species, been made available almost on demand. Here is the twist worth sitting with. Historian Sidney Mintz, in his influential study, Sweetness and Power, traced how sugar moved over the following thousands of years from a rare, hard-won luxury into one of the most heavily traded, heavily desired commodities in human history. Mintz documented how sugar first arrived in Europe as an expensive medicinal curiosity, sold in tiny quantities by apothecaries, and available almost exclusively to royalty and the extremely wealthy. A substance so rare that a single cone of refined sugar could function as a genuine luxury gift between nobles. Over the following centuries, as demand grew and colonial plantations expanded to meet it, sugar eventually reshaped entire economies, and in one of the darker chapters of that history, helped drive the machinery of the transatlantic slave trade to meet a demand that never seemed to have a ceiling. Mintz's central argument was that sugar did not simply become popular because people discovered they liked it. People had always liked it. What changed was that an ancient, deeply wired craving finally met a supply chain willing and able to satisfy it at almost any scale. And once that mechanism existed, the craving itself provided all the demand it would ever need. The craving itself never changed across any of this. What changed was the distance between wanting sweetness and getting it, a gap that shrank across thousands of years from an entire forest canopy down to a garden, then down to a sack of refined crystals, then eventually down to the length of your own arm reaching into a cabinet. You reach for something sweet without really deciding to. The exact same craving your infant self had before you could walk or talk. The exact same craving that once sent an ancestor scanning a green canopy for a single flash of red fruit worth the climb. The craving was never the problem. It was built to operate in a world where satisfying it took real, sustained effort, matched to a supply that was naturally rare, scattered, and seasonal. What changed is not you, and it is not your willpower. What changed is that the reward your body has always wanted now sits behind almost no effort at all, closer than it has ever been in the entire history of your species, available at every checkout counter in every corner store, without a single tree to climb. The next time that craving shows up uninvited, it is worth remembering that it did not appear because something in you broke. It appeared because something in you has been working exactly as designed for a very long time. Built for a world that, until recently, never once handed sweetness over for free. If stories like this one make you see your own everyday life differently, hit subscribe. A new story from the deep past goes up every week.